All right, gather round. Let me tell you about the time Holmes met his match. He called her the woman, you see, the one who could outsmart even him. It started with a knock at our door, a giant of a man in a mask and furs, claiming to be a count. But Holmes saw right through him. It was the King of Bohemia himself, in quite a pickle. Years ago, he'd had an affair with a woman, an opera singer named Irene Adler. Now, he was set to marry a princess, and Irene had a compromising photograph of the two of them together, threatening to send it on the wedding day. The king had tried everything, burglars, spies, you name it, but Irene was too clever. The photograph was hidden somewhere in her house, Bohemia Lodge. Holmes, cool as ever, took the case. First, he went in disguise, a down-and-out groom, charming information out of everyone at the Mews. He learned Irene lived quietly, saw one man, a lawyer named Godfrey Norton, and drove out every day at 5. The lawyer was a complication. Then, things got wild. I was with Holmes when we saw Irene and Norton jump into separate cabs, both shouting to be driven like the devil to the Church of St. Monica. Holmes, quick as a flash, hailed a third cab, and we raced after them. We burst into the church just as they were about to be married. It turned out they needed a witness, and Holmes, in his shabby disguise, was dragged up to the altar to stand in. He actually witnessed their wedding. He couldn't help but laugh later, the absurdity of it. But the photograph was still the problem. Holmes hatched a plan. That evening, we waited outside Bohemia Lodge. He had a smoke rocket, you see. When Irene arrived, a staged brawl broke out in the street. Holmes, in a new disguise as a kindly clergyman, rushed in to protect her, then collapsed, faking injury. They carried him into the sitting room. This was my cue. As soon as they opened the window for air, Holmes gave the signal. I tossed in the rocket and yelled, "Fire!" The place filled with smoke, and everyone panicked. Holmes knew a woman's instinct in a fire is to grab what she values most. And just like he predicted, Irene, thinking her house was burning, rushed to a hidden panel above the bell pull and pulled out the photograph. Holmes saw where she kept it. We slipped away in the confusion. Holmes knew he had her. He planned to go back the next morning with the king to retrieve the picture. But as we reached Baker Street, a young man in an ulster passed us and said, "Good night, Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Holmes froze. He recognized the voice. The next morning the king arrived, impatient. We went to Bohemia Lodge, confident of success. But the maid told us Irene and her husband had left the country that morning. They were gone. Holmes, stunned, rushed inside. The room was ransacked, but she'd left something for him. A photograph of herself and a letter addressed to him. She recognized him at the church, even in his disguise. She'd known he was the one the king would send. She'd figured out his trick and had been watching him. She'd left the country, taking the compromising photograph with her, but she'd left her own picture and a note saying the king had wronged her, but she wouldn't use the photograph against him, keeping it only for her own protection. The king was relieved, but Holmes, well, Holmes was beaten, but smarted by a woman. He keeps that photograph, you know. And when he talks about her, it's always with a certain respect. He calls her the woman, the one who showed him that even the most perfect reasoning machine can be outplayed.